Okay, so in the present tense, this is Spanish 1 stuff. We should know the meanings of all these verbs. Always make sure you put the meanings next to the verb in each box. So acabar is to finish. In the present tense, what are our conjugations? I finish, you finish, he, she finishes, and so on. Yo form? Acabo. Tú acabas. Él, ella, usted acaba. Nosotros acabamos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes acaban.
Is that an O-N or A-N?
A-N. Then for comer. Comer is to eat. Como, comes, come, comemos, comen. What happens if I happen to add an accent right here?
Como estás?
If I add an accent on the first O, it becomes the word how.
Yeah.
If I add an accent on the last O, actually it would be I-O. Now the one that does have the O, and I'll show it to you when we do the preterite, is for AR verbs. So if this happened to have an accent right here, then that would be somebody singular finished as opposed to I finish present tense. Okay. All right, and escribir is to write, and yo form. Escribo, then escribes, escribimos, escriben, or I'm sorry, escribe, escribimos, escriben. So you have an AR, an ER, and an IR verb. Don't forget that you have EMOS and IMOS in the present tense. Now what happened though with the verb jugar in the present tense? What happened with jugar? What did we change? What did we do?
Take out the UE.
It's a U to UE change inside the boot. It's called the stem changing verb. Next chapter we're actually going to spend a whole chapter on stem changing verbs. But remember we called it a boot. Why?
Because the almost didn't get.
Right, the nosotros form is just the U, doesn't have a change. So inside the boot you make U to UE change for jugar. Querer means to want. We should remember these from Spanish 1. What happens with querer? I-E change. Good. Okay. Now, if you were to conjugate these verbs in the preterite, remember what I said about if a verb is irregular in the present tense, it doesn't mean that it's going to be irregular in the preterite. So, jugar is not going to make any UE changes in the preterite because UE changes don't exist in the preterite. New tense, new set of rules. So, jugar is going to be a good old regular verb. But you're going to need to remember that verbs that end in car, gar, and zar will make a change only in the yo form. So we're going to do jugar in the next practice here in the preterite in just a minute. It'll just change in the yo form. The rest will be regular conjugations. Querer, however, is irregular in the boot shape, E to IE, but in the preterite it's going to be completely different. We're going to cover it after midterm. Every single box will change and it won't even use the same endings that we just talked about. So, to be continued. Ir in the present tense is completely irregular. Voy, vas, va, vamos, van. You don't have to jot it down yet. But ir is actually going to be completely irregular in a different way. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. You see those two don't look anything alike? So different verb tense means different rules for each verb. So anything that you've known up until this point, should aside for just right now, and then we'll come back to it. Okay. But for today, we're only going to focus on preterite of AR verbs. This is just the book page that happens to give you the information on AR verbs. And today we're just going to practice conjugating them in the present tense. Your book always gives it to you in a column. That's why we always do separate notes, because I like to do it side by side, so that you notice that you have accents on the singular side, not any accents on the plural side. So that might help you remember that only for the yo form, only for the el usted form. Your book covers your cargarzad a little bit differently than I showed it to you. I call them cargarzad verbs because I think it's easier to remember. Drop 3 letters, add 3. They do C. If there's a C before an AR verb, then you change it to Q to E. I think it's slightly more complicated that way. Whichever way works for you, then do it that way. But a big thing to remember about these verbs is that they only change in the yo form. Okay. However, the quiz that we're going to have, it's going to be Monday, we'll start putting your AR, ER, and IR together with your cargar and zad verbs all together. We're only doing regular verbs for now. We're going to learn some irregular later this week, but we're only going to quiz on regular verbs first and then irregular later. Okay. But for today, the boxes that I just asked you to do were just AR verbs. So we're going to practice our AR first, and then tomorrow we're going to start joining our AR, ER, and IR. Okay. Acabar, we just did acabar in the present tense, acabar in the preterite. The regular verb, what changes? Your endings now say that I finished, you finished, he finished. Okay. Listen to the difference. Acabo, that means I finish, versus acabó. That means he finished. Did everybody hear the slight difference in pronunciation? Acabo, acabó. So there's a slight emphasis on that accent letter, and so that's where accent's very crucial. And if we don't have that accent there, that's what we were talking about. Acabo means I finished. Acabó means he, she, or you, or anybody singular finished. Right? Don't forget your accents there, and do emphasize that sound when you're saying it out loud. Okay, the navegar happens to be a gar verb, ends in GAR, so you're going to change only the yo form, only in the preterite. Drop the GAR, do GUE, I sailed. And the rest of the forms are regular conjugations, no extra changes. Sacar fotos is a CAR verb, a car verb. So in the preterite, only in the yo form, change it to QUE accent. Notice you have accents for all the yo forms, all the AO-STED forms. Anything to do with regular verbs, which these cargarizad verbs do fall into the regular category, it's a pattern, then you have to worry about accents in the yo form and AO-STED form. So far, so good? Okay. Organizar, what happens with it? CE, so you drop 3 letters, only replace it with 2. Okay, and the rest regular conjugations. Jugar, what happened with jugar in the present tense? What changed? UE. So it was a UE boot, no longer UE changes. Jugar in the preterite is just a GUE change for the yo form. Jugué, jugaste, jugó, jugamos, jugaron. The reason really for these yo form spelling changes is for pronunciation purposes, because if you were to put the G and E together or the Z and E together, they wouldn't make the same sound as all the other ones. So it would be jugué instead of jugué. That's why you have to make that change there. All the other ones don't have an E next to the G, so it makes the same sound. Buscar, QUE change only for the yo forms. This is a cod verb. So do remember that if something is irregular in the present tense, it may or may not be irregular in the preterite. So just know for now, anything that we do is going to be a regular verb unless I tell you otherwise. And your cargarizad verbs will be mixed together with your AR, ER, IR.